If you're struggling to grow your music business income, you may just be asking yourself the wrong questions. In today's episode, I'm going to uncover 3 ways that you can reframe the way you ask questions to be able to grow your music business with the clarity and momentum you deserve. Welcome to the Musicians Creating Prosperity podcast, where you'll discover business, mindset, and leadership strategies to put your music business on autopilot. I'm your host, Dr. Fabiana Claure, pianist and former university professor turned 7-figure entrepreneur dedicated to empowering artists worldwide. Whether you're a seasoned musician or other creative entrepreneur, this podcast is your guide to financial, artistic, and lifestyle freedom. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Musicians Creating Prosperity podcast. Today, we're talking about how to ask yourself better questions in order to grow your music business. Now, you may be wondering why I chose this episode, why I wanted to talk about that. And the really reason is because I speak with musicians very often who are coming and wanting to learn about how to grow their music businesses. And typically, one of the first things that I ask them is, what is your greatest challenge? What is the number one thing that is stopping you from trying to do this successfully, right? What are you facing in terms of obstacles and why are you stuck? And typically the reason why they feel they're stuck is not the real reason, right? And this may be something you may resonate with, if you're a music educator and you're working with students and they're coming to you and playing for you in the piano, whatever instrument you teach, and they think the challenge is something, but you as the subject matter expert, you always have a better understanding of what the real problem is. And typically it's not what your students believe it is. So this may not be a totally new concept for you, but I want to share this episode to give you some strategies as it relates to your music business and growing it strategically. This is the purpose of this podcast, is to help you evolve and grow, not just from a tactical strategy and tactics, but also from a mindset perspective and just changing the way you think, right? So in this episode, I want to share why it's so important that you are very careful about the way you think and the questions you ask yourself, because the quality of your questions will determine the quality of your outcomes. And if you're asking yourself the wrong questions, that's probably why you're stuck. So a little bit of background on this topic. As I said before, as a subject matter expert, you will always see that when you work with your own clients, your students, they're going to come to you with some questions and some ideas that are not necessarily the right questions. But when it comes to our businesses, sometimes you may find yourself that you're asking yourself questions that are not really the most strategic questions to ask. And why is this important? Because if you're focusing on solving the wrong type of problem in your business, then inevitably you're going to continue playing at a certain level, right? You're going to continue solving small level problems that are maybe going to move the needle a little bit in your business, but they're not really going to be the definite factor in really creating the quantum leaps that you're here to grow and create. So let's talk about some strategies that you can use to reframe perhaps the way you ask yourself questions when it comes to growing your business, specifically into the online space. So there are 3 ways that you're going to be able to reframe some of the most typical questions that are not necessarily the best questions, but that come up a lot. And so I'm going to share those with you in today's episode. So the first question that I hear a lot is, how will I deliver this program? If I build an online program and I share my content through my expertise instead of through my time, which is what we are always advocating for musicians to do. And we certainly have a lot of episodes talking about this at great length in this podcast. So if you haven't gone into the first, I would say 10 or 12 episodes, then make sure you just binge through those, because they're going to frame all of this and explain in a lot more detail what this idea of being able to monetize your expertise instead of trading your time comes from. But that goes beyond the topic of today's episode. But the idea is, when it comes to building this type of online program, I oftentimes have conversations with musicians who are so preoccupied with the way in which they're going to teach their students. So they're super concerned about how are they going to position, how are they going to teach, what platform are they going to use, how many modules are they going to have, do they need to create an entire curriculum ahead of time or not? And a lot of times these questions are just getting ahead of yourself, because if you're too worried about how are you going to deliver your services in this new and innovative way, perhaps you've been a teacher who's been working pretty much in person for all your life, or you're a performer who's been depending on gigging income, and the idea of building an online program feels daunting and overwhelming, and you're getting caught up in your head around the deliverables. How are you going to actually teach this program? How are you going to get your students the results? Then that is the wrong question to ask if you are at an early stage in putting this together. Now, obviously, if you already have an existing online program and you're looking into optimize it and scale it, then you're going to probably be asking yourself other questions. But this is the initial example of what it looks like for most musicians who are considering transitioning into the online space. This is typically one of the first questions. How will I teach the actual curriculum? And the reason why this is not the best question to ask at this stage is because unless you actually have clients who can come in and pay for your services, it doesn't make sense for you to get too caught up on all of the logistics of how are you going to teach your services when you don't even have any clients to begin with, right? So even if you have already an existing full studio with many students and you're going to consider folding them into this new and online way of teaching, the question is always going to come down to how will you position your program and build that perception of value and communicate the value of what you're going to do before you even worry about how you're going to deliver it. And the reason is not because you're going to be irresponsible or you're just going to sell something without knowing anything. The reason is unless you have the actual clients that are paying for your services, asking yourself the question of which platform are you going to use, how many videos are you going to serve, deliver, how many handouts, PDFs, ebooks, none of that is going to really matter until you have your first clients. So the first suggestion is instead of asking yourself, how will I deliver this service? I want you to ask yourself, how will I communicate the value of this program and attract ideal clients that will resonate with my message? Now you're asking yourself a much more important question that actually will help you clarify who do you even want to serve? What is the outcome you're going to, communicate? What is the result that will allow people to want to come into your program in the first place? Because especially as you're pricing your program in a high ticket capacity, what people ultimately invest in is in the result, the outcome. They don't really care whether they have 10 videos to watch, 3 PDFs to download. What they care about is in the result. Okay. And obviously, once you have your clients, then yes, you'll be able to deliver and build and create it, all the materials. And I've done an entire different episode just talking about like what this process will look like. So this is one example of how to ask yourself a better question. The second example is instead of asking yourself, what will people think about like my positioning? What will people think about what I'm doing? And getting yourself in a place of self-consciousness and just being very concerned and preoccupied around people's opinions on what you're doing and how you're putting yourself out there. There's always a bit of a reinvention, and it feels very vulnerable for musicians when you're in this process of kind of starting to present yourself in a new way to your environment, to your community, to people who know you. There's always a bit of concern. I always see this come up, and I certainly felt it myself as well as I was in the process of evolving my own brand. Let's say when I was a university professor, I was typically associated with being an academic and teaching at a university, working with musicians, helping them build their businesses inside academia. And yes, I had my own business, etc. But the idea of just positioning myself online all of a sudden and saying, hey, I'm happy to help people who from around the world felt a little bit scary and vulnerable at the beginning. But ultimately, what drove me to be able to step out of my own shell was this idea that I knew people needed what I had to do. I knew people needed the knowledge and the information that I had to share. And so I focused more on trying to solve people's problems and caring about just solving the problem that I saw that existed for musicians, which was the fact that they were just trying to approach growth in the wrong way. They were trying to add more one-on-one students to their studios. They were trying to add more gigging and performance opportunities in their schedules. And they were just getting themselves into a place of complete burnout because they were always going to be working in a very manual labor type way instead of working through their brain, working through their mind, working through their knowledge, right? So when you are in this process of reinvention, if you are looking into building your online business, inevitably there will be a repositioning of your brand. And this typical question around, hey, what will people think about this? Will people like it? Will people not like it? My encouragement to you is to stop asking yourself that type of question, which is very low level, very much self-conscious, and in a way egoic even, because you're making it about you. And instead, if you can make this about the problem you actually want to solve and who it's for, immediately the pressure around your own self-consciousness is going to go away, because you're going to now be more focused on what's the problem that I want to solve for the people I want to serve. How can I focus on solving that problem in the best way possible? Of course, communicating that as well. But when you shift the focus on you and instead put it on the people you want to serve, and if there's any ounce of oh, but what people will say, I'm not really sure, and you're starting to feel self-conscious about this at all, if instead of making it about you, you can make it about the people you want to serve, and you can say, you know what, I know that there's people out there that need what I have to offer, and if I don't, muster the courage to just put myself out there and share what I have to share, people are not going to like solve their problems. They're going to stay stuck. And when you care more about like not letting your ideal clients struggle than you do about what people are going to think about you and whether they're going to like it or not, then you're asking yourself a better question, right? So instead of what will people think about me, make it about your clients. How can I solve this in such a like passionate way that I'm so convicted, I'm so committed and just there's this conviction about what I'm doing that totally bypasses the self-consciousness that I may have about people's opinions, right? So that's a second example. Ultimately, if you focus too much on you and what people will think about you, then you make it about yourself. And building a business truly from a place of mission, of calling, is not about making it about you. It's about helping people. And I know you're in this podcast, you're listening to this because you have something to offer and you truly care. You want to be able to help people through your skills. So this is a better way of reframing the questions that you may be asking yourself right now. Now, I also want to share the importance, kind of piggybacking on the first question that I brought up around really framing the positioning and the value and not worrying so much about the delivery yet. Because remember, you're not going to ultimately teach something that you've never taught before. If you're a musician trying to package your skills more strategically and just wondering how, it'll always be based on a foundation of knowledge that you already have, right? Even if you're teaching it online in this way for the first time and you're just struggling to figure out how to position it, ultimately it's important that you remember that you're not teaching something that's completely unrelated to what you do. And so you should stand in your ground. You should feel confident and excited that you ultimately will do a great job, even if you're just kind of putting it together as you go, right? So that's one thing. But I also wanted to make sure that you are so aware of the value of just positioning your offer and communicating the value and elevating the perception of that value in the eyes of your clients, and how that's so much more important as you're creating this at the beginning stage than it is which platform are you going to use, whether you're going to have videos and audios and this amount of PDFs or that amount of PDFs. I'll share a little story about why I'm so passionate about this and why I believe this can apply to you as you're listening to this. So this past weekend was my husband's birthday, and we went to Disneyland and Disney World, actually, in Orlando. And we've been there a few times, and I honestly feel so inspired by just experiencing the world that Disney has built. Not only learning about Disney and as it relates to his own story and his journey, really creating a vision, right? Creating a vision for this park, for the brand, for everything that he's built in this empire, really, that Disney has become. But the nuances and the strategic business principles that can be learned from Disney and then applied to everything else in life. So we were going through different shows, different rides, and as we were in line, for the different rides, every step of the experience from coming into the first ride, there was a ride that was about traveling to space and going to space in this rocket and simulation, right, of an experience. And the entire journey, I mean, this happens with all the rides and the events, but every moment, the entire process of going through the ride experience, the ride is not the end goal. Like the whole journey, even standing in line, there are little, animations and things that are entertaining you, even as you're standing in line. Then there's videos that are presented anticipating what the ride is going to be all about and giving some context for what the ride is and why it's important. And, there's a ride that they really hype it up around going into space in this rocket. And the ride itself it's great. It's not a bad ride, but it's the anticipation of the ride that truly builds the value of the experience and raises the expectations in the audience and builds the momentum about what's going to happen in the actual ride. So as you're standing in line, you're watching videos, you're seeing pictures, there's all these different, things that are animations that are part of the experience as you're standing in line. Then there's these speakers that come on a video and start talking about what you're about to experience and how you better be ready and you're going to get trained. And if you are making sure you know all the protocols for going into outer space. And then there's another video that comes afterwards that says, are you ready? Let's make sure. And it's just such a level of raising the expectations of the actual ride. I mean, if you've been to those amusement parks, you know that it's usually just a few minutes, the actual ride, right? The ride is maybe 2 or 3 minutes tops. I don't know if it's even longer than that, but it's the entire expectation of the ride that truly builds the momentum and raises the value in the eyes of the audience, right? By the time you get in the ride, imagine if you were to just come into the ride and just get into the rocket ship and then just have the 3 minute thing and then leave. Like you would be like, oh, okay, this was okay. But because there's this whole line that you have to go through, even if you have a fast pass or whatever they call it, a genie pass or whatever to like go quicker, there's still always a lot of line and you have to stand in there. And it's really deliberate because they extend the value of the experience. They have all of these things that you can be a part of and listen and watch. And in some instances they overhype it, I think, because they make you feel very nervous. Like, are you sure you're going to do this? Make sure that if you're not happy with being, in the state in space or feeling whatever, like you can leave now if you need to. Like this is the time to leave. Like they really build up the anticipation of the 2 minute ride. And now I want to make it clear, like I believe none of you are creating a 2 minute ride in the programs that you're serving. I know what you're delivering and building and creating is incredibly valuable, but I just want to show you an example of how incredible brands like Disney have been able to crack this code of building the perception of value in anticipation for the actual product, the actual service. And so I want you to learn from this and hopefully get inspired in how can you do this in your business? How can you focus more on creating that perception of value and communicating that, exquisitely in everything you do, so that you're not too caught up in the delivery yet until you actually have the clients. And this, yes, once you have the clients, you'll be able to build it and just develop it in the best way, and getting their input and all of those things are great. But if you're just focusing on that question, how will I deliver, instead of how will I build a perception of value, then that may be why you're stuck, right? So again, touching back on the second question of like, instead of what will people think about this, you want to ask yourself, how can I solve a problem that is so important to me that I won't care what people will think? I really won't care. I want to just fix this no matter what it is, because I'm more committed to the solution than I am to the other people's opinions around what I'm doing. And number 3 is a very typical question that I hear so many times when I speak with musicians, which is, what if this doesn't work out for me? What if I put all this effort? What if I go through the trouble of redesigning my brand, of positioning myself, of overcoming my fears and just getting it out there and sharing what I do, and it doesn't work out? And although I can appreciate that question and I can understand where it's coming from, a better question to ask yourself is, what if this works out? How will I manage the new level of growth? How will I make it sustainable? How will I be okay with the results of the success of my goals, of what I've been doing? And many times when you are not clear around what that's going to look like and how you want things to pan out when things succeed, then unconsciously you can self-sabotage your success simply because you're afraid of success. And it sounds crazy, but like I know what that feels like. And I've seen that so often in the work I do with musicians, which is like, what if this works out? It feels scary. And in many ways, you may feel that you're not ready for that success, subconsciously or consciously. And so I want to encourage you to reframe. If you are right now very worried about failure, right? And this goes into a huge topic that I'll probably do another episode at some point about. But the idea of, instead of asking yourself, what if it doesn't work out, where basically you're creating doubt about the possibility of succeeding in doing this, if instead of doing that, you actually assume that it's going to work out, you act as if success was guaranteed, right? And you start asking yourself, how will I manage the successful outcome of what I'm doing? How will I be able to create what I need once this is working? How will I manage the growth? How will I maintain, the quality of services that I'm, offering in this program? How will I make sure that if it succeeds, that when it succeeds, I should say, not if, that when this succeeds, I won't feel burned out. I won't feel, oh my goodness, now this worked out and I'm maxed out. I cannot deliver this. I'm at capacity because I kind of wasn't expecting it to succeed. No, no, no. If instead of doubting the success, if you could doubt the doubts that you have, now you're asking yourself better questions. Don't doubt that it's going to work out. If anything, just doubt that it wouldn't. Why wouldn't it work out? Right? Especially if you are being strategic around surrounding yourself with people who are doing what you want to do, if you're surrounding yourself with the right information, if you're following a proven framework, if you're not just winging it on your own, if you're pursuing the activities that people who succeed typically do, which is to look for models, look for examples, to ask for support, to find ways to grow in community and in collaboration and not just trying to do everything as a lone wolf, there's no reason why you wouldn't succeed. And so instead of asking yourself, what if this doesn't work? Ask yourself, what will I do with this success when it works? Right? And there's so many more examples of questions that you could use to reframe the way you're growing your music business. But I wanted to share these 3 examples with you today because I hear this so often. And honestly, I can say when I started switching my own pattern of making questions and decision-making pattern, everything started to align in my life. And this is why I really want you to really be conscious about your own inner voices. Oftentimes when you're too immersed in your stories and the objections and the blocks that you put mentally around what's possible or what's not possible for you, that's when you get stuck and you're just like in your head. So my hope is that with this episode, you have a way of maybe listening to your thoughts, listening to the questions that you're posing, and ask yourself right now, what is the number one greatest challenge that you have in growing your business? Can you clearly point that out? Can you clearly identify what is the number one challenge, right? And if you're unclear on what the challenge is, that's already a sign that there's work you need to do, right? That you need to do something, because not knowing what your main challenge is, or worse, thinking that you have a challenge when in fact that's not the real challenge. There's a bigger challenge that you're just overlooking because you're focused on the wrong questions. Then that's probably why you have been feeling stuck. That's why you haven't seen the growth that you need in your business. Because once again, the quality of your questions determines the quality of your answers, and the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your actions, right? So if you want to create a better business, you want to build your life with prosperity, with abundance, with a sense of fulfillment, you need to be very mindful of the questions you ask yourself and whether or not you're actually solving the right problem. So I hope this helps you think about this, really position yourself in a new way, and start wondering how you can not just solve the problems, but also be very mindful and aware of the way you ask questions. If you love this episode, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts, your takeaways. Send me a message and reach out. We love hearing from our listeners in our podcast. This is our very first year in the podcast, and our goal is to reach as many musicians and creatives around the world. So if you love this episode, leave us a review and reach out to us. We would love to connect. Fabiana Claure /connect, fabianaclaure.com /connect. You can reach out to me and my team. We would be happy to hear your thoughts and to see any other way that you could get additional guidance and support in clarifying your business, and hopefully also helping you think in a new way about what's possible. Definitely reach out. And in the meantime, let me know what other podcast episodes you would like for me to share and teach and bring to my community. It is my pleasure to show up for you each and every week. I'm committed to this. I want to help change lives and improve the outcomes and the businesses and the lives of musicians and those around musicians around the world. Thank you for watching. Let's prosper together.